Hey, Paul, how's your week been?
It's lovely, mate. How's yours going?
It's pretty good, except that today my life just hit a peak.
Oh no, you've peaked already?
My life has peaked because our guests today are the legendary game developers who created Quest for Glory, the Shannara point and click adventure game from 1995, Hero U, and Summer Days is next. We have on the show Lori and Corey Cole. Welcome to the show and thank you for being here.
Hello,
How are you today?
we're fine.
And we're sorry you're so peaked about it.
So, how are things going with your next game?
They're going great. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm really, really excited about it.
Yeah, the art we're getting is gorgeous. Paul's doing some really interesting stuff musically, and Lori is uh, oh 2 in the morning is talking about ideas she has for the game, and then first thing when we get up, it's like, well, what about this? And so we're you know really starting to get going on it. It's game design is a weird process because people talk about having an idea for a game, and
Mhm.
I used to say, well, ideas are a dime a dozen. That everybody's got lots of ideas, but it's the process where you start going from having a general concept of what the game is, and then saying, okay, oh dear, we've actually committed to this. We're actually going to make a game, and there are 10,000 piddly little details we have to work out before we can do it. So it's you know getting those ideas to start to coalesce, and it usually for us, maybe it's because we're old people, but it takes us a few months just to take the basic ideas and start to get them to really coalesce and to say, okay, we've got all these great ideas for a game, and oh, well, here's actually the game we're going to make out of it.
I imagine the process is probably like always in flux, like constantly moving as you apply it, practical application, apply it with the programmers and the artists. You have to make a lot of changes on the
Oh
fly.
yes, and you really have to adapt to what you have, team members that you have, and to their contributions, because certainly the idea of having a character talk all in music that I came up with today is directly applicable to the fact that we have you, Paul, as a musician working on the project, and I can talk to you directly and get this give and take feedback so that we can perfect these ideas and get it to work.
So yeah, every game we make is a total reflection of who's on it. So we talk about Corey and Laurie Cole, game designers, and first of all, that's not very accurate because Laurie does about 90% of the actual design work, and I do about 10% of the design and about 80% of the scut work that has to be done to get the games done. And we kind of go back and forth in our roles on that. But just everyone you have on there. Uh, when we started on Hero U, Road to Redemption, first of all, the title came from a team member at one of the meetings. Said, why don't we play off the road movies and call it, the Road to Redemption or the Rogue to Redemption? And we said that was pretty good. It was only after we had that title totally locked in that I realized it's actually a terrible title. The game names need to be short. Never ever put punctuation in a game title. Hero Dash U is a terrible idea. It's hard to search for. Uh, uh, so, you make the mistakes, and you make some of them over and over, but we try mostly to make new mistakes every time. So, yeah, Dave Gilbert with Waj and I just came out with Unavowed, and that's a good, 3-syllable, one-word title. Nice and simple. Anthem, another recent game.
I do like a little bit of a multi-word title though. I just figure with these one-word titles, you're just eventually going to run out of words in the language.
And they're not very descriptive. You really don't know what a game called Anthem is about.
Oh, I mean, it's obvious. Ayn Rand wrote a novelette called Anthem, and it's all a post uh, Armageddon, coming out of your bomb shelter and trying to have a libertarian world. That's obviously what the game's about.
I
Oh, it
see.
isn't?
Yeah, I must have missed that one. That book wasn't in pictures, so I skipped it.
um, so yeah, so Hero U started out with Andrew Golding, who did Jolly Rover, which is kind of a traditional Monkey Island style adventure game, and then MacGuffin's Curse, which is a fun puzzle game with an exploded top-down view. And so we said, okay, we'll make the game look like MacGuffin's Curse, and and we'll make it a roguelike game with story was our kind of what we said it was going to be. And so the Rogue Redemption also worked because it was a roguelike. And that all lasted about a month into production of the game, at which point the team switched up, and our art director said, I hate this top-down exploded look, and here's what we're going to do instead. And it proceeded from there. But that's everything you do in a game is a function of both the designers, and every team member has a contribution, and what they're good at and what they enjoy doing gets to the game.
Hmm.
Well, I quite like the extended name because it takes us back, kind of atavistically speaking, to obviously the Quest for Glory series would be it's Hero U, Rogue to Redemption, Hero U, Summer Days, or Summer Days at Hero U, but it kind of carries like that staple along with it, which I think is really neat. And I also like that you went with Rogue to Redemption because it taught me that if you switch around the U in the spelling, that you end up with a color and not a rogue character, which I embarrassingly sent to you guys. But I learned something that day about a new color people put on their lips.
Huh. Well, I didn't know that one. So actually, yeah, the Quest for Glory series was originally named Heroes Quest, and it was all about the theme. And Heroes Quest, of course, has that apostrophe and hero apostrophe S Quest, and was subtitled So You Want to Be a Hero. So the full name of that game was Heroes Quest So You Want to Be a Hero. And we very quickly started just referring to it as Heroes Quest. Later became Quest for Glory. So I guess that's all I need to learn is that even though we have a whole series of games coming up in the Hero U universe, that the Hero universe, there we go, that I probably should just call the first one Hero U and forget about the subtitle.
So there are actually, much to the delight of the fans, there's quite a few Quest for Glory references throughout Hero U, Rogue to Redemption so far. And I believe there is a more direct link in a character, Calbin, who will be appearing in Summer Days, who I believe is relative of Calb from Quest for Glory 3.
Yes, indeed. That we have a lot of relatives from other characters from previous games and things like that. So the world has this consistency of style and characters.
Whereas I was going to say the exact opposite. Anything that seems like a Quest for Glory reference is just an absolute coincidence.
Well, I was going to say, like, how careful do you feel you have to be in order to like try to connect the two universes while still not getting Activision up in arms about it?
It's a delicate balance, really. But the fact is, nobody at Activision, or Sierra for that matter, ever knew what we were doing.
Yeah, while we were doing Quest for Glory. And the fact is that those games are copyrighted. We would never quote lines directly out of the game or stuff like that, or take. Obviously, we don't even look at the source code from it. It would be irrelevant if we did. That was all written in SCI. We're writing in Unity, C#, and our own tool composer. So the games are they share a world, and that's because that's the fantasy gaming world that we used for our tabletop role playing long before Sierra. Yeah, it's just most of the references to Quest for Glory that are in Hero U are actually from our backers.
I see.
That we enabled high-level backers to have statues and paintings and such in the game. Interestingly, that was our high tier, but we actually lost money on every one of those because it cost us more to create the art for it than we got from the backers. But that's okay because we would have spent that money anyway because we needed paintings, statues, stuff. So we got free ideas from our backers, and a lot of them were Quest for Glory fans, and put in references to their favorite Quest for Glory character. But that's all. That's all protected. I want to say protected parody, but it's just you can refer to a previous work, and Shakespeare referred to the Bible and all sorts of stuff in his work. So it's a long-standing tradition. The arts things refer back to other things. It's no problem at all. We're not copying anything.
Mhm. What was it like working at Sierra?
The best of places, the worst of places, all at the same time.
Yeah, it was extremely stressful. I mean, we worked huge long hours, and everybody on the team did. 50, 60-hour weeks were the norm. But the thing is that what some companies don't understand, because Electronic Arts has had a lot of lawsuits and stuff about mandatory unpaid overtime, uh, but you don't really think about that when you're doing it. It's not, until the final couple years when we were working in Quest for Glory 5, we never really had a case where the company came to us and said, you must work through the holidays and you must work overtime. It was just, we were doing stuff that we really cared about, we really loved, and you could see that you get to 6 or 7 in the evening, and you're in the middle of something. You keep working on it. You don't stop. I got I got stopped a couple times by local sheriff driving home at midnight or 2 a.m. and wondering what I was doing out the time. And I said, "So I'm going home from work."
Well, you said best of times, worst of times, and I think a lot of us have heard kind of the worst of times when it comes to Sierra's. It ended in quite a spectacular, disastrous form. Odd combination of words. Sorry. My point is, I was kind of wondering if you had any like standout best moments, something like a blooper gag reel sort of stories that happened while you were there.
Oh, there were lots, but the one thing for Heroes Quest, particularly in the beginning of Quest for Glory 2, is we had all the team members sitting together and just feeding ideas off each other. So an artist would doodle something, and programmer would look over there and see it and said, "Oh, I know how to get that into the game." And we'd get stuff that Lori and I never dreamed of. But one of the ones on Quest for Glory 2, Brian Hughes came up with the idea that in one of the dead-end alleyways there was a Saurus repair shop because said, we're taking these dinosaurs out into the desert and running into monsters and such, and they must get pretty damaged. So there's got to be somewhere, basically a garage in town somewhere to repair the Sauruses, and got all that done. We gave it their seal of approval, and it was just a fun little incidental scene. And then we got to pressing the game onto floppy disks, and there was no place to fit it. So we reluctantly had to cut that out. AG, what do they call it? Adventure Game Developers Anonymous or something like that. Anonymous Game Developers, AGD, did the fan remake of Quest for Glory 2, and they actually got a hold of Brian and put in a version of the Saurus Repair Shop into the remake. So that's kind of cool. There's a feature in the remake that isn't in the original game.
And most of the puns and the jokes that were Easter egg style things came from the artists or from the programmers rather than from us directly. Some of them we put in ourselves, but a lot of them did come from the other team members, and that was always great. The best games are the synergy of the people working for it, and everybody taking the time to really care about what they're doing. And that's what made it exciting, and that's what made the best of times at Sierra. That and certain aspects of developing games is just incredible, like doing voices, doing voice recording with these wonderful actors is just one of those huge high points in your life of getting to work with these professionals and listening to these words on paper come to life. That's just incredible moments.
Yeah, a lot of times we would get to 2 months to game release and would absolutely despair that we had a horrible game that we just spent a year working on, and it was just not fun. And then the soundtrack came in, because Sierra didn't usually put a musician on the project until the last couple months, and all of a sudden you would have this game that felt flat and boring, and the music comes in and the sound effects come in, and all of a sudden it's rich and wonderful. So a lot of our games, we didn't know if they were any good until they were almost done. One of the things where stress and fun come together was on Quest for Glory 3. That after multiple 50 or 60-hour weeks, one of the artists eyes started to blur, and he got a model sheet for Ego, and Ego was the pet name that Sierra had for your character in any game. So that You didn't have to worry about whether it was Rosella or the hero or whatever. It was always Ego.
Right.
And he misread Ego as Ego with two G's, and immediately started to think about Eggo waffles. I guess he hadn't eaten for a while either. And he proceeded to draw a standing up waffle on legs, walking through the environment, and animated
Yeah,
it.
the awful waffle walker.
And
Yeah.
and that became the awful waffle walker, just because he had misread a model sheet and started fantasizing and probably delirious. And so that was one of the Easter eggs in Quest for Glory 3. And we wrote a little bit of dialogue for it and stuff. Arne the Aardvark in Quest for Glory 3 is a combination of the fact that Laurie and I love the Cerebus graphic novels, and that features, you know, a talking aardvark, Cerebus the Aardvark. And Arne Saknussemm comes from A Journey to the Center of the Earth by H.G. Wells. And was it H.G. Wells? Jules Verne?
Jules Verne, yes.
Jules Verne, sorry. Jules Verne. Journey to the... So yes, Arne Saknussemm was a fictitious character in Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. And the characters, I think they eventually meet him late on, but most of the time they don't actually ever meet Arne Saknussemm, but they see the initials AS inscribed on cavern walls all through the as their journey down into the center of the Earth. And we just decided that Arne Saknussemm was just one of the ultimate funny names, and so we said we'll have an aardvark named Arne.
Well, we also had a stuffed artifact.
We also had a little pet. We
Yeah.
have one.
We have a stuffed aardvark called Arnie too. So therefore, these are all things that come together.
What was your favorite Quest for Glory game to work on?
Probably the first one, because that one was where we had a small team all working together and all synergizing together at the same time in the same place. And every other game after that, we were divided into blocks. The artist's way over there and the programmer's way over there. So it didn't get quite the team spirit and team group that we had for the first game.
Whereas for me, working on Quest for Glory 4 was the most fun. And first of all, I loved the theme and the dark Transylvania, comedy horror and stuff like that. And 4 was the main one that I was really working on full time as a designer, rather than splitting duties between being a programmer or not even being in the project. Quest for Glory 3, almost the entire duration of Quest for Glory 3, I was off in a different part of the building working on a completely separate project, not even involved with, and only got in the last month or two. And Heroes Quest, I was there, but I was mostly as the programmer. I was leading the programming team and contributed to the design, obviously, but was distracted. So 4 was the one that I was really, all there for, and so I had a really great time putting in the whole Dr. Cranium sequence that was based around my Castle of Dr. Brain game, and I got to put in a lot more puzzle type stuff because I'm more of the the puzzles and challenges type thing, whereas Laurie is more about story and characters.
And I see Lori a bit on the Facebook groups and forums and stuff like that, answering questions of the fans. She's always very good about. Both of you are very good about addressing fans' questions about the old games. Has there ever been a question that has been asked of you that you actually hadn't thought about and kind of stumped you?
There often are, especially when we have certain people on Facebook who know more about the games than we do. It's like, oh, I didn't realize I said that 20 years ago. 30 years,
30.
yeah.
I mean, Heroes Quest.
That's right.
Heroes Quest came out in 1989. It was at the end of '89, so we're not quite 30 years, but it is more than 30 years since we started working on it in '88. We made these games and came up with all the ideas for it, and of course the team members contributed stuff, most of which we knew, but every once in a while probably somebody slipped in something that we never even saw. And then we had the fans that have played these games obsessively for 20 or 30 years and know every nuance of it, whereas we have to rely on this flawed thing called memory. We used my project before I came to Sierra was a a desktop publishing system that I was developing independently for the Atari ST computers. Uh, and so when Lori started working on Heroes Quest, that was the tools we were using. Is we had an Atari ST and a laser printer, and Lori did all of her design documents and stuff on the Atari. And obviously, that was a product that did not make it to market. And so there's, it had its own proprietary file format. And so we obviously do not have any of those documents anymore.
I'm kind of curious, going back to you mentioned your two favorite Quest for Glory games, respectively 1 and 4. Is that representative to you as the ones you're also the most proud of, or would that be different?
Well, 4 is such a difficult game. It's certainly the one I love the best. I love the characters, and I love the setting, and I love all the incidental minor characters that come into it, and the story. And yet, when it came out, it was a debacle because it was awful. It was the most buggy game ever set out. It had 1 week of testing for one of the most complex games that was ever developed at Sierra, and it showed it. It crashed everywhere. I don't know how anybody ever managed to play that first version of the game. And here it is, my proudest moment, the game I love the most, and it's destroyed. It's just devastating to the soul.
I actually didn't have any problems playing that, actually. I think because I played the disc version that didn't have the voice, perhaps. I think the CD version was the one that had the major game-breaking glitches.
No, I would not say so. It
Huh?
was the other way
Oh,
around.
really?
The original version on that was the floppy disk only version. It just had major crashing bugs all through it, and a lot of errors. There were hundreds or thousands of known documented errors when it released. And what it came down to is we had a meeting in late November, early December, and the lead programmer basically said, my team is completely burned out on this, and we really can't work on this anymore. And management badly needed a fall release that year because I think King's Quest or whatever they're working on was running late. And so they decided to push it out the door. But it really, the game came out in November, and it should have come out like the following April. That's how much work it still needed at that point. But yeah, the CD version was actually a reprieve for us because first of all, it was awesome working with top Hollywood voice actors. I got to go down to the studio and ran the recording equipment and got described. We had a Hollywood director named Stu Rosen, but he described me as quote the talent unquote as one of the co-authors of the game, and kind of cool. Work with John Rhys Davies and Joni Gerber, and wonderful, talented actors and actresses. But that extra year that it took to record all those voices and break them down and get everything on CD gave Sierra the opportunity to assign one programmer to go through and fix a lot of the outstanding bugs. So he fixed hundreds of bugs in the game. Still didn't get all of them. I mean, the game still can crash as soon as you get outside the cave at the beginning of the game and stuff like that. But he really cleaned it up a lot. So I would definitely recommend anyone play the CD version with the voices are just amazing.
Yeah, I concur to that. I love the talkie versions.
But games we're proudest of, I'd say 1, 2, and 4 as far as the ones I worked on. 3 actually is the only one of the series that I actually played through beginning to end, and that's because I wasn't working on it, so I came in late and was brought on to edit and proofread it. And I was just really charmed by the way Lori had put together the story and the characters and the map and the puzzle elements. I think really is from a storytelling viewpoint, 3 may very well be the strongest. From a puzzle standpoint, I think 1, 2, and 4. It's hard to choose between them. Yeah, 2 is an awesome game. It suffered for the fact that it was Sierra's last 16-color game at the beginning of the 256 color era, and it was the last parser input typed game at the beginning of the point-and-click era, and so it enjoyed about 3 months of sales and then disappeared off the map. Oh, and of course we had little things like Sierra had a little problem with trademarking the name Heroes Quest, and had to change the name to Quest for Glory. And part of the agreement on that is they were not allowed to say formerly Heroes Quest, because the other company that did Advanced Hero Quest did not want any confusion with their game. So all of a sudden you had this game on the market called Quest for Glory 2, when nobody had even ever seen or heard of Quest for Glory 1. So it was like, well, some new game, and I guess I didn't play the first one, so I guess I don't want to play this one. So we're amazed anyone played Quest for Glory 2, actually. but it is a really good game. It's and it's I'd rate it as about equal to Quest for Glory 4 is maybe the best. Quest for Glory 1, Heroes Quest gets the nod because it was groundbreaking.
Very
It
much
was
so.
really the first game to mix role playing and adventure gaming, and and we fit an awful lot of stuff in there into the Sierra language. Remember, games at that point were shipping on 360K floppy disks, and a lot of people did not have hard disks. That wasn't just a distribution medium. They were playing off the disks themselves, which meant that any critical piece of content had to be repeated on every single disk, which left almost no room for unique content. So it's really kind of a miracle game that it worked at all.
So how did Quest for Glory 5 come to be? Because I believe there was a little bit of difficulty trying to get that one going.
Well, we were fired after game 4,
Oh,
or to say they broke our contract, and so that we had this contract for 3 games and we still had a game on it, but they said, "Oh, we're not going to make it. We're just going to let you go." And so therefore we parted ways with Ken Williams and Sierra forevermore, or so we thought. And then you can fast forward several years later when Sierra had all moved up north, and there was just this building here with a few people still working here, and they were their own division of Sierra, and they didn't have any games. They had the rights to do the Realm, which was the multiplayer role-playing game that they had. And so they needed to do something with that, since that was their only brand. And they thought the idea, well, nobody up north is doing Quest for Glory. What if we make Quest for Glory part of the Realm and do it that way? So we got called out of the blue to come in and discuss it and look at what they're doing and how this could be practical. And basically we had to tell them, this isn't practical at all. Basically, they had nothing in there in the Realm to do stories or quests or any of the things that you really want to play a game for, or what I play games for.
Yeah, give it another year, we could have done that, but they were trying to release it in 2 or 3 months after our meeting. It was like there were no tools to put in any content, and can't make that a Quest for Glory. But of course, it's always the wrong answer. There's a song that goes with the lyrics. It goes, "Lie, lie, lie to a general, lie to a brigadier," and that's the correct way to work with company management that we didn't quite understand at the time. Is just tell them whatever they want to hear, and then take as long as it takes. But unfortunately, I was brought up to tell the truth, and kind of hard for me to tell lies even to management that needs to hear lies.
Damn morality, always getting in the way.
So they had to work on this stupid thing, and about 4 months later from that original meeting, they decided, well, maybe we could do a multiplayer Quest for Glory, and they put somebody else in charge of it. And that somebody else happened to be Terry Robinson, who was, had been working with us prior to on Sierra, knew us. And he said, I can't do this. You have to get Corey and Lori in on this. And so therefore, they had no product without us. And so they called us back in to do Quest for Glory 5. And that's how it came about.
Yeah, unfortunately, it was a little difficult for me because they weren't actually 100% committed to it. They said, well, we're going to explore the possibility of doing Quest for Glory 5. um, and and they've invited me to come back in, not to actually work in the product, but to join their systems group and work on their new engines. And that just wasn't something I wanted to be doing at the time. It was also that they couldn't promise me more than a job for 2 or 3 months while they explored this, or possibly longer, but not working on Quest for Glory. And I had another very lucrative job offer at the time, so I ended up going off to that. And then Lori worked on Quest for Glory 5. And of course, with once again looking in my crystal ball of hindsight, uh, that I should have said, okay, yeah, fine, I'll come in and do that, and probably could have gotten the technology closer to what we needed earlier. The development process for Quest for Glory 5 was just kind of crazy. It ended up taking, it was designed to take like 18 months, and actually took 3.5 years, uh, and millions, and the $1.5 million budget or so turned into a 4.5 million by the end of the project. So uh, it was a big game,
Yeah.
and it's flawed graphically. The main problem is that we started out with one graphics engine doing a technique called voxels, which looked wonderful. It was just really great until they started actually testing and discovered that you got characters in the foreground and went down to 1 frame per second. Uh, and it was too slow. And they ended up, the Genius system program, and they had Eric Lengale, who later created the C3 engine, created a 3D, the voxel engine. Then he created a new polygon graphics engine for it, and got it to work, but it didn't have the development time of companies like Unreal that's all they do is engines. And So the graphics are very very blocky and unpolished. Uh, but the gameplay, the storyline, and the characters and so on, it's really all there. It really is a Quest for Glory game.
Absolutely.
But a lot of people pass it by because they don't like the look of it.
Yeah. I'm really glad that it exists, because I think that was like an amazing send off to the series.
Yeah, and it also has a really sophisticated, very sophisticated combat system with all the characters having independent, all the opponents that you play have independent AI. They aren't just hack and slash. They really do have behaviors and fuzzy programming logic to how they'll behave, so that you can go to the same area and meet this bunch of brigands, and they will not behave the same way that you previously did, and you have to actually think each time you come there.
Right.
It's not just hack and slash. So the game has a lot going for it. It just
Mhm.
doesn't hold up well if you have to look at it, because the graphics are so decayed because of how many times we had to redo the art.
That's too bad, because it is absolutely a fantastic game worth playing. And like I said, I was so pleased when I finally got around to it. Like when it finally came out, it even took a few years then for me to get a computer that would run it. And so by that point, I'd already been like many years detached from Quest for Glory 4, but it was just so, going through it again with all the the callbacks and references to the previous games. It was just, everything was there. It was just a perfect way to end.
Yeah, very cathartic.
And then there's the music. Oh, the music for that blows you away. You can listen to that soundtrack again and again.
Hmm.
And we even had the full orchestra behind it. Just it blows away all the music we've ever had for a game before. And Chance Thomas, who was our musician, had the time, unlike all Sierra games where they just throw the musician on at the last moment. He had the time to create and the money behind him to create a wonderful CD that Sierra had never bothered with before. So there were a lot of really wonderful things that came out of Quest for Glory 5.
Yeah, and a lot of that was the fact the game, the process took more than 3 years, and he was brought in very early in the project, gave him time to do that. And we actually have the same situation with Hero U Road to Redemption, is that I very naively said we were going to do a game in a year when I originally put it on Kickstarter, and privately thought, okay, it might stretch out to 18 months or 2 years, but it actually took us 5.5 years to get the game done. And in one sense, that's obviously for budget that's horrific. For players that are anxious to play the game. That's an awful long time to wait. But 5 years of development effort meant that Laurie had time to write that whole time, and so it's got richer text and dialogue than anything we had done before. So it's a blessing in disguise to have a game that runs very, very late, if you can take advantage of that time to make the game better.
Yeah, absolutely well put. Yeah, and kind of would like to move on to Hero U, but I guess one last question, at least on my end, from digging in the past, would be just, first of all, I guess a general statement that I always felt that Quest for Glory, by a league, had superior soundtracks to the other Sierra games. That's just my opinion, but Quest for Glory 3, for example, I loved how it had kind of this Turkish ney, which is a Turkish flute, let's say, playing throughout it. It sounded brilliant. Quest for Glory 4 and 5 I actually have on my mobile device and listen to occasionally. It's just beautiful soundtracks. So I was kind of wondering, a question I guess to both of you is, what was your role or direction in creating these soundtracks, or what kind of input did you have, and what would you tell them asking for a friend?
Well, we were very minimum then because we hardly ever saw the musicians on our games. We could tell them, I had more influence over the musician for 5, where we had Chance Thomas, and he actually had the time to work on it. And I did get some, like in Quest for Glory 2, we got a pre-release, we did talk with the um, composer and give him some ideas of what we were doing. But once we did that, it's like, okay, they went off in their universe and did what they wanted to do. We did talk about styles sometimes, but Quest for Glory 4 has these wonderful, Hall of the Mountain King and classics woven into hard rock. So it really comes down to, we had some really great musicians at Sierra.
So I would actually argue with the idea that our games were somehow magically that much richer in the music than other Sierra games. Part of it is the fact that we came in relatively late. So like King's Quest already was on King's Quest 4 at the point where, in fact, let's see, 4 came out 4. We were even started on Heroes Quest 1. So they were on King's Quest 5 was in parallel to Quest for Glory 2. So they had a lot of games that were done previous to us, and I would say King's Quest 4 was the one where they really started getting serious about great music. They had a Hollywood composer named William Goldstein was the composer, I think, for King's Quest 4, and he was in there playing real instruments, and they set up a little like a music classroom style thing for him to work on the music for that, and they were really starting to get serious about. Ken Williams promoted the idea of making music for the Roland MT32 and LAPC1. That at that point, it was unheard of to take a $500 or $1,000 music synthesizer and attach it to a computer just so you could play games. But Ken said, "Oh, we'll just bundle these in with everyone," and he actually did. Sierra directly sold a lot of Roland sound boxes to put in there, and so Sierra was very serious about having great music. Mark Siebert was the director of the music department. He was mostly there as a programmer and technical musician there, but he was also a pretty good musician in his own right. And he was the main composer behind Quest for Glory 1, Heroes Quest, and created that iconic Heroes theme, which is just really great. And a guy named Chris Brayman came in, and Chris Brayman's wife was part of an international dance troupe. So he was able to bring in that, like Shima's dance music and the wonderful Arabian, Middle Eastern music in Quest for Glory 2. Rudy Helm, Aubrey Hodges, and Chance Thomas. We just got some really good musicians on it, but they worked on the other Sierra games as well. So I would say on the whole that Sierra really pushed the idea that music was a critical part of a game, more so than any of the other developers at that stage.
So fast forwarding a few years, what got you deciding to go back into the saddle to start on Hero U?
We needed the money. It was a matter of the right time, the right place, and everything coming together.
Yeah, we started hearing, it was this guy named Tim Schafer, running a company called Double Fine, and of course, formerly from LucasArts. And Tim put up the Double Fine, put up the Double Fine Adventure, they called it at the time. And that was just going to be a little like 3 or 4 room prototype adventure game that wasn't actually going to be about a game. It was going to be about the process of how do you make an adventure game. And they had 2-player productions coming in and doing the documentary video on it. And that came onto Kickstarter and just blew everyone away. It was, they asked for, I think, 300,000 or 400,000, and they ended up getting $2.3 million and 80,000 backers for that thing. And we started getting all kinds of people phoning us, sending us emails, and posting on Facebook and saying, "Hey, go look and see what Tim Schafer just did. You guys have got to do this. You got to make a new Quest for Glory." Of course, we couldn't make a new Quest for Glory. Activision, we did his work for hire for Sierra, and Activision owns all those rights. And Activision has been notoriously completely uninterested in having anyone license them from them. So we've talked with 3 other companies that have gone to Activision, tried to license Quest for Glory to make a Quest for Glory 6 or whatever, and they've just turned everyone down. But they said, you guys have got to come back. We'll all buy your game, and we said, okay, yeah, this Kickstarter thing's interesting. And I said, but I don't want to do another computer game. It's insane making a computer game. Making a computer game without the support of a publisher, oh my God, we knew how much work and stress that is. And so I said, well, I'll take my old D&D module, Tower of Indomitable Circumstance, that I did back in the late 70s, and I'll do a new version of that for Pathfinder, and we'll sell that on Kickstarter. And then I said, well, okay, Lori co-wrote a book called by the book was How to Be a Hero series that eventually led to the School for Heroes, and that one was completed but never really polished. It needed editing and so on. So I said, okay, we'll get the rewrites done on that, and then we'll do a Kickstarter for your book. But all the fans kept saying, make a game, we want a new game.
Reading's so boring.
No, they're just they just want us to open up our veins, spill our blood out into their computer screens for them. So one of the fans, Andrew Golding from Australia, I think Melbourne, came along and said, "Hey, I've done these 2 games, and I will develop this game for you. I'll run the team, I'll do all the work, and all you got to do is write and design." And we said, "Cool, okay. Well, in that case, we'll do the game." And that was kind of the impetus for us. We'd also been working with a guy named Oded Sharon, Australian game developer. Israeli. Is Oded Sharon of Israel, who ran a gaming company there, and so we had done some consulting work for him on a game based on Bob Marley's life that eventually made it out as Bolt Riley, but unfortunately Bolt Riley does not actually include any of the parts we worked on. So it was like part 1, and we had written part 2 of the game. And Oded was really hot on us doing a Kickstarter for a game with them. Yeah, we weren't sure, so we wanted to make our own games. With everybody telling us you got to make games, we said, okay, well, why not? We need the money. Maybe if we do a Kickstarter, people will throw money at us, and all we have to do is do like Tim Schafer did and ask for 400,000, and people will come out with $2 or $3 million for us, and we'll be able to pay our mortgage. And of course, instead, what happened is we discovered that Kickstarter is really, really hard. So we spent 4 weeks beforehand, another 4 weeks during the Kickstarter, and 6 years after that, pushing the game in order to just barely get to our $400,000 mark. And we knew, I mean, our budget, we did the budget beforehand. We had an $800,000 budget. But we said, if we ask for $800,000 on Kickstarter, we won't get it, and it's all or nothing. So we got the 400,000 to make an $800,000 game, and you know, once again, if we'd had the reverse crystal ball and I could see into the future, or a regular crystal ball, I would say, okay, now we've got to go and get investors to cover the rest of the expense. And instead, we basically did everything on a shoestring.
Well, definitely wouldn't notice from the final product, that's for sure. I was kind of curious. The prelude to what I'm going to say is based on the idea of wondering how you look at a blank sheet of paper and from there flesh out the actual idea that would become Hero U Rogue to Redemption. But what I'm curious about is that there's a clear connection between Quest for Glory and basically what I'm trying to say is the hero's tale, or better yet, kind of the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell comes to mind. I'm wondering if, well, I guess first of all, was Joseph Campbell an inspiration to you, and furthermore, what is it about the hero's journey that really inspires you to write?
Well, let me hit the first part of that, and then I'll let Laurie hit the second part. The first part is I read something by a science fiction author one time, and people said, how do you go from a blank sheet of paper to writing these amazing books? He said, oh, it's really easy. You just take a very dull knife, or a sharpened spoon works well, and use it to cut open your veins and bleed onto the paper until you have a book done. Which basically says it's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of stress and a lot of second guessing yourself, but you work and you work and you work and refine, and eventually you end up with something. But Laurie can talk about the hero's journey.
Yeah. We weren't actually familiar with Joseph Campbell's premises when we started out writing Quest for Glory games and the Hero Quest, but we loved adventure games. We loved good stories, and the essence of many and many a good story is the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell was only describing what the things that resonate deeply within the human soul. And so therefore we wanted to the important part of making a game was to tell a story that does resonate on a unconscious level, that inspires people, that they feel like, yes, this is what I'd love, this is what I appreciate. And so that's what we were trying to do with our games, basically put in this feeling of adventure and the feeling of accomplishment and the things that everyone really wants to be a hero in their own heart.
And we just love the concept of the hero in the first place, and the idea that everyone can be a hero, and that it's all about it's not about somehow being stronger and smarter and faster than everyone else. It's about basically being willing to put your life on the line and do what it takes to do what needs to be done. The importance of the individual, that you don't do what other people tell you to do because they tell you to do it. You do it because you know what's right, and you do what is right. And that resonated through our games. And we actually used words like archetype that were Joseph Campbell words, even though we hadn't read his stuff at the time. We'd probably read derivative stuff. But yeah, so it was all about being a hero. And that informed kind of the structure of all the games. So we ended up with the hero's journey without knowing it.
Prophesized it. That's really cool. So, would kind of, this is like a timepiece of a question, but what were some notable differences in creating Hero U Rogue to Redemption versus creating the first Hero's Quest? Both in the technology limitations, through adapting to what you could work with now. What were some really standout sort of adjustments that had to be made to tackle a new game in a new era?
Well, for one thing, had to start from scratch with everything. With Sierra, you went into the company and they already had all the artists in place, all the tools in place that you needed to make a game. And so, and the musician in the background, everything. And here we were suddenly on our own, having to find all these things and start all over again with nobody in charge but us. And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, we got into Sierra. I've always said we got there at the perfect time for what we wanted to do. and that's 1988. They had made several games with their AGI engine. They were just developing the more sophisticated SCI game development engine, and that was my first job. As I worked on that, and I adapted it to the Atari ST. We started Sierra at a time when the tools were becoming much more sophisticated, and the artists mostly knew what they were doing, and the whole focus was on story and puzzles and and art and music and so on. There was almost all the games up till then had been independent one-off efforts of people developing their own, basically taking the basic technology and then developing the games from the ground up. When we came in at Sierra, they were beyond that starting phase, and they had tools that were designed to make any number of games with SCI that would all follow that same template of having typed in text and having backgrounds and moving characters and so on, and all the tools are in place. So our entire focus on Heroes Quest, 70% of our focus on Heroes Quest was just about writing the story and the puzzles and so on, and getting and working with the team of artists and programmers to get it to work. The other piece of that wasn't there was the fact that we were making a role-playing game, and our mandate was to create Sierra's first role-playing game since Ultima 2. But because I had worked on the system side, and I understood role-playing games intimately, I was able to build an object-oriented layer on top of SCI that did all the stats and skills and combat system and all that stuff. And it really, to me at least, was not that hard. But because we had the tools in place, we were able to really focus on telling the story and writing the dialogue and stuff like that. And it wasn't about developing the basic technology. When we got to Quest for, and of course, Sierra pulled the rug out from under us every single game. We never had quite the same tools and technology each one. Something major always changed, but Quest for Glory 5 was the biggest change, where they decided SCI had grown old, long of tooth, and they decided to write the game in C++ and develop all the technology from the ground up. And nobody remembered how many years and millions of dollars have been put into building SCI, and they really had to reduplicate all that work in addition to making a game. So that's why Quest for Glory 5 was a much harder effort than previous ones. But yeah, we got there at the right time in the right place to be able to create games where the whole emphasis was on telling a story and making it look good, and it was not on how do you get pixels onto the screen and how do you get data onto a floppy disk. Those were problems that were already solved by Sierra.
Right. I'm kind of imagining in my head on the other side of things, and with Hero U, it sounds almost like the embodiment of a real life adventure game where you start with no inventory and you have to gather up all your tools and all your team and start smashing items together to come up with a product, because like you said, Sierra had all the tools in place, whereas with Hero U, all of a sudden you got to gather everything up and make it work and orchestrate the entire process.
Well, have you heard the story about Bill Gates died one day and got taken on a tour of heaven and hell? And when he went down to heaven, there were all these people sitting around in robes and playing harps, and it all seemed kind of boring to him. And then he got down to see hell, and they had a disco and rock music going, and all kinds of exciting things, and virtual reality computer games, and everything was absolutely amazing. So he said, "Oh heck, I'll take hell." And then he actually got there and discovered no, he got thrown into a fiery pit to dig up coals. And he said, "This isn't what you showed me." He said, "Oh, well, don't you know that was the demo version? This is the real game." So Hero U, we started out with the demo version. We got to see that there was this game, MacGuffin's Curse. It was a fully working game and had been developed in Unity 3D. And we were told that Unity could handle 2D as well as 3D, and that was the tool. And we said, "Oh, okay, we know what that is." We worked at Sierra. We had SCI, and that was our toolkit for making adventure games. Well, Unity is a really, really powerful tool. It can do amazing things. What it isn't is a tool specifically designed to make 2D adventure games.
Mm.
And that we discovered when we started to work with it that and especially when our original team lead left the team, he very generously offered to let us use all of his source code from his previous game. But new people coming in didn't really want to do that. They had their own ideas of what they wanted to build, and our fans had their own ideas that they wanted to see a Sierra-like game. And we discovered that Unity really was not the best tool for that. So, it's basically, we had a pair of pliers and we needed a screwdriver.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did have to reinvent a lot of stuff. And it also has to do, as we said, the team makes the game. So we got in, the artists we could find, and we wanted to find people that could do the detailed, sophisticated 2D character animation that we'd had at Sierra. And we envisioned all the tools that Sierra had that made it very easy to animate those characters. And we discovered that there are two types of 2D artists these days. There's the types that are employed making a lot of money working for Disney and places. And there are the people that don't actually know how to make a commercial product with their 2D stuff. We just couldn't find anyone. We had, a couple of very enthusiastic volunteers that, could do like little, 8-bit, or 16-color tiny characters animating, and that just did not have the degree of sophistication we were looking for. We wanted to do full color and everything else.
Plus, we had things
Uh,
like the engines. We didn't have an animation engine, and so we looked out for commercial products that had animation engines. And one of the ones we explored for a while was the one that did things like a puppet, and all the pieces of the character's body were broken into segments, and then you animated the segments, and just like you were doing a marionette. And the funny thing with that style of animation is it looks like you've got a stupid marionette moving on the screen. And it was like, this just doesn't look like like anything Sierra ever did. And we were being held to a standard. We couldn't make something that looked worse than a game that was made 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
and maybe it shows our inflexibility, as we possibly could have made a very stylistic game doing that. There are some very stylistic games out there that do not look in the least bit realistic, but are really pretty cool. But we had this vision of making a game that was like a Sierra game with very pseudo-realistic characters, and we had our original paintings of the characters and so on as still paintings that looked really good, and we wanted to animate them, and it just wasn't working out. We did get one experienced 2D animator, and unfortunately, a few months after he started the project, he got an offer he couldn't refuse from Electronic Arts, and for twice the money, and we couldn't compete with that on our very low budget. So we had originally said we do not want to go 3D. We remembered the disaster that was Quest for Glory 5 production as our first 3D game, and people said no, it's not like that. Unity is really sophisticated. You can do 3D animation. It's a lot easier and faster than it used to be. And eventually we bit the bullet and said, okay, this is going to be a 3D game. And we had a much easier time finding 3D animators.
Well, we contracted out all our art and our animation initially. We basically found a company in China that actually would do these things for us. So that's how we did it. We basically went to the Chinese company, and they gave us our characters all done in 3D. And yes, Unity could handle that easier than it could handle the 2D stuff at the time. And then we had to look at our backgrounds, and our backgrounds really weren't working either. And we had to go to a 3D background. And, we just had to keep reinventing what we were doing, because we hit the wall of reality of what we didn't know.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so of course, again, with our crystal ball that they unfortunately do not issue to game developers, we could have said in the beginning, okay, obviously we're going to have to make this a 3D game. but it was not in the least bit obvious in 2012 or 2013 that we needed to go with full 3D.
Right.
And so we essentially wasted 2 years of development. And I won't say totally wasted, because what we got was a lot of really nice prototypes, and we got the the ideas of the scenes, the characters. And meanwhile, Laurie was writing her head off, writing all kinds of text and dialogue for the game. So we got a good head start of the game during those 2 years. But that was we originally said was how long the entire game was going to take, and instead it turned into the prototype phase. Then we started over in 2015, beginning of 2015, we started over in 3D. July 2015, we ran a second Kickstarter and got some supplementary cash, and really thought we'd be done with the game by the end of 2016, and instead we were still struggling with stuff. We were about a third of the way through then, and early 2017 we started doing serious play testing, and it took close to a year of alpha and beta testing before we really had everything in place and everything tested. In 2018, July, we finally released the game.
That's really cool insight into kind of evolving with the times, and like you kind of said, it's bending and flexing to make things work as they're in flux. I'm kind of wondering on the other side of things, on the kind of creative writing side of things, Sean O'Connor, star of Rogue to Redemption, how did from the period that you were peer pressured by fans into making a game, peer pressure does work, man. It's tough. From the time that you were just begged to make a game, rightfully so. I'm so glad you did. To the point of beginning production, where was Sean's character? Did he exist yet? Did you have a fleshed out idea of what you would do, or did you kind of pull him out of a hat and then start to develop him?
Well, when we were going into the Kickstarter, we had actually tried several years before to create a kind of like a text adventure style game with simplified graphics, and we had this story set in the School for Heroes, and we had characters developed, and it was all about this young woman who was going to be a wizard, and all the characters and her crazy roommate and all sorts of interesting things. And we had the whole story, well, I had the whole story worked out. And so when we started the Kickstarter, that was my thought, that we would go in and we could actually have that as the overlaying story over this 2D flat, top-down adventure that was supposed to be roguelike. And unfortunately, people.
Well, she had a very stupid husband who said, "Oh, well, people just say that we're doing a clone of Harry Potter because we've got a school for wizards and stuff." So I said, "Okay, well, first of all, let's age the characters. Let's make it a university instead of a high school, and let's do a different story. Let's do the rogue story instead of the wizard story."
So basically, made me start all over from scratch. So yes, by the time we started the 2 months prior to the Kickstarter, I had to reinvent what kind of game I was going to make.
And in hindsight, if I'd been a smarter marketing person, it would not have been a bad thing to make a game that was perceived as a Harry Potter clone, and that go for both the Quest for Glory market and the Harry Potter market. But at the time, we wanted to differentiate, and Laurie came up with a really interesting story about a young man who's out on the streets and gets approached to become a thief and thinks, "So that'll be pretty cool. I could become a thief and make a living at it." And came up with the whole storyline, and we said, "Oh, that's a really fun storyline. Let's make that game."
How have the receptions been for Hero U?
It's been really good. We have of course a few haters. There are a few haters for every game, but our review scores have been running in the 80 to 90% range, which is just really dramatically good for an indie effort like ours, or actually for a AAA commercial game for that matter. So we've gotten very good reviews. The comments on Steam and GOG, really very positive. We have a very positive is the term for it rating. So people do like the game. Unfortunately, not very many people have discovered it. So our sales are lagging way behind where we thought they were, and It did not meet the goal of paying our bills, but it has met the goal of us making a game that we're proud of and that fans really like. So we are trying to make more.
Yeah, and when we came into this thing, we wanted to, we thought we were making one game when we started the first Kickstarter, and by the end of the Kickstarter, we realized no, really, our fans, the people that are actually supporting us, want a Quest for Glory game, and so we'll give them something as close to a Quest for Glory as we can, but we didn't. Quest for Glory, the main character was an avatar of yourself. We never put words in his mouth. We just let you imagine it. And there was no personality to that character. So the main character of the whole game series had no character. And that's a very different way of looking at how to tell a story when you have a no personality person that you're writing about.
And in hindsight, it's kind of unbelievable that it worked.
Mhm.
Yeah. So here we are coming to Hero U, and I really wanted to take the tip from how Monkey Island did it because I really enjoyed the Monkey Island. The first game of the Monkey Island with Guybrush Threepwood was just such a great character, and
Yeah.
he gave the game life. So to me, I really kind of wanted to do a game that style with a strong central character who had distinct personalities because he could be, snarky or he could be sweet. But that was what was telling the story, not just this anonymous, ambiguous character. And that's just a different style. And we were going with things like in the previous games you could ask anything and just keep getting the same answers back so you never had to remember anything. But for this one we wanted a fluid, more realistic style so that the text flowed from what you've talked about, and dialogue could go in very different ways, but you could never actually go back and see what you would have happened if you said something else. And so we were creating a very, very different game. And again, we have no clue when we're working on this and when we're creating this whether anybody will like what we're doing. I mean, they
Mhm.
wanted a Quest for Glory game, and we were giving them something that vaguely resembled a Quest for Glory game. And so it was a great deal of a relief when we found out the fans actually liked what we were doing, even though they said, "Oh, well, this isn't what we were expecting." Well, no, it isn't what you were expecting, but it's what you got.
Although I think it's an exaggeration to say it only vaguely resembles a Quest for Glory. Part of what we had, the funny thing is the writer who did not work on any of the Quest for Glories, but did work with us on Shannara, is the hilariously funny Josh Mandel. And Josh was the main writer on Freddie Farkas' Frontier Pharmacist, along with Al Lowe, and used to be a stand-up comedian before he came to work at Sierra. And he had done the Lisa Shoot Larry Reloaded with Al, and was kind of burned out on that. Took a year away from social media. When he came back, I contacted him and said, I don't suppose you'd consider doing writing for another game. And surprisingly, he came on. And Josh ended up writing, almost all, let's say 90% of all the messages for like interacting with torch sconces and bookcases and statues and everything in the game. And just did all the stuff that, I tried to do in Quest for Glory, but didn't have time to do in this game. And so Josh really brought back that Quest for Glory ambiance. So it's funny that the person who did not work on Quest for Glory really is the strongest Quest for Glory writer we had, and added a lot of silliness and fun to the game. That I think does nice stuff because that's the model. It's the model we used for all the Quest for Glory games and for Hero U. Is we're telling a very serious story. There's the games really are dramatic. Um, this is Hero U Rogue to Redemption is a coming of age story for a a young man, 18 or so, who's um, you know comes from a poor family, has been living in the streets, and now he's brought into this university for heroes, and doesn't feel like he's any sort of a hero. Um, but he's going to try, or at least try not to flunk out. And it's then all sorts of things happen. One of the students disappears. People's lives are in danger. There's monsters roaming the hallways. There's stuff going on that's pretty serious. Uh, and you've got this wisecracking young man who is not a superior warrior or anything like that, um, trying to trying to fix these problems. Uh, but we don't want it to be heavy. We don't want it to be it's not a horror game. It's not a deadly serious story. Uh, and all the incidental writing. So the characters Laurie has written are very evocative, and some of them, like Sean's roommate Aeolus, is a actual Bard student, and is just constantly making puns and stuff because that's what bards do. Uh, and interacting with all the objects in the game, it's just for players that love to explore and discover. There's discovery everywhere in the game. Every object, everything, anywhere in the game is interactable. Uh, Probably 50 times as much interaction as you had in a Quest for Glory, and just so much to learn and discover. And a lot of it is just there for fun. So it's not a goal directed. Everything furthers your advancement through the game. Most of it is there just for fun. Uh, and that's kind of the mix that Quest for Glory did, and that we did again in Hero U. So in that sense, the games are the same type of game. But at the same time, Hero U has big differences. One of them is the game is much more structured because you are a student at a university. You have classes to go to. You have meals at certain times. There's a curfew, which you quickly learn you can break. Everybody is supposed to be in bed at 10, and first thing you do after you go to your room at 10 o'clock is you sneak out again and adventure till 1 in the morning, which is actually based on Laurie and me, as we never get to bed before midnight. Development-wise, that was the worst mistake we would have made. A midnight bedtime would have made a whole lot of the testing. Probably would have cut out a third of the bugs in the testing. Because that 1 hour, really kills you. That's because it's 12:30 in the morning on day 19, but as far as the flow of the game is concerned, it's really day 18.
Right, yeah, and I love the open world sort of feel that the game has. That's why I fell in love with adventure games way back when, was because it had this feeling of like you said, when I like when things aren't so heavy on objective, where you can just wander around and find little things that programmers or Josh Mandel thought to write into the game. It just makes it all the more engrossing. And now I just want to go back and play it again and skip a meal and see if I'm hungry enough to come up with an awful waffle walker or something like that.
So the big differences between Quest for Glory and Hero U. First of all, we've got that that day-to-day structure. There are events that happen in the game that are set to day 13. Something happens, regardless of what you've done before that, and then your interaction with it. Having the main viewpoint characters, Laurie mentioned, Sean O'Connor is a distinct personality, or maybe one of 3 distinct personalities, depending whether you play him as charming, smart, or snarky. And the other thing is the importance of dialogue and the other characters in the game. Quest for Glory, we had a very limited amount of memory to play with, and so your characters really were not that much different from the from a bookshelf.
Right.
You talk to the centaur farmer. He has a purpose in the game, and his purpose is to reveal the storyline about the brigand leader having some surprising attributes, and that the brigand leader is supposedly this terrible person, but actually insists on helping the centaur farmer and fixing his broken leg and stuff like that, and really is not that bad a person. So that you get some very important story elements from it. But other than that, the character isn't really much of a character. Whereas in Hero U, you've got Katie, the pirate's daughter, and she's got a whole backstory. She has her own goals and interests. She's she's not there to become a hero. She's there to find a way to earn enough money to create a rest home for retired sailors.
Hmm.
Uh, all right, that's not her. That's one of her many goals. Uh, but the point is that she's got her own storyline, her own goals. You are interacting with them, and you get to really explore in depth the character. It's not just you meet the person once in his field, and then after that, every time you visit him, he's doing the same thing.
Right.
So characters progress and change throughout this game. Their dialogue changes every day, and that's the tens of thousands of lines of dialogue that Lori wrote. It is a gigantic game, but it's a gigantic game where we tried to make the characters alive and real, and meaningful. So your relationship with the other students is as important as did you defeat the monster.
Yeah,
And in fact, you can actually get through the game without fighting a single monster.
that's right.
It's really hard. It makes the game 10 times as hard, but it can be done.
So what are your current plans for moving forward with the Hero U series?
Well,
Because you're currently working on Summer Days.
yes. Summer Days at Hero U, which is a very different style game, a very different appearance game, a very simpler game in a lot of ways, because it would be, nice to have a game out in the next year or so and not take 5 years to do a game.
Hmm.
So I have a little bit of problem because we actually took some pre-orders for Hero U 2 Wizard's Way when we did the original Kickstarter, and little did we know that it was going to take us 6 years to deliver the first one. Uh, so let alone the second one. And frankly, the sales we've had don't justify doing the Wizard's Way right now. So our plan actually is everybody that pre-ordered Wizard's Way will get Summer Days at Hero U. And then we'll see what Kickstarter will do for us. If we could actually go back on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or one of those sites and run a $1 million Kickstarter for the next game, then yeah, we can do Wizard's Way. But we cannot afford to deficit finance another game. We have a lot of personal funds and our retirement savings, stuff like that, and we got bailed out at the very last minute, January 2018. Out of the blue, we had a Quest for Glory fan show up who had inherited some money and wanted to invest in Rogue to Redemption. And well, it turns out it was a terrible investment for him, but it was a lifesaver for us. He came in and got us the funding that got us to launch. We've done actually 5 revisions since the initial launch. Last one was in February of 2019. We delivered version 1.5, which we think is the final version, except we're still working on Rogue Redemption. I'm doing German and French and Chinese translations that we're going to put up. And there may be other changes in the future, but mostly we're trying to focus on the future. So Summer Days at Hero U is turning into an absolutely beautiful game, and it's a very different style. It's like if we took the essence of a Quest for Glory or Hero U and boiled it down to, here are the key scenes. And we did that actually in Hero U a little. We have what we call a vignette, which is where we have a still painting that illustrates an important event in the game. So Summer Days is all vignettes. We have the scene in the dining hall or the scene at the festival. That's your background, and then we have the characters popped up on top of that. And we have all the dialogue and all the choices and all the interaction that we had in Hero U Quest for Glory. But it's against these still backgrounds, so the focus is on the story and the words. The game is just so beautiful. And then we've got this guy named Paul Corman who's working with us on music to make sure that we've got an amazing soundscape underneath it. So it's going to be a really neat game. And it is something that we can do in a year to a year and a half, and we'll have out sometime in 2020, like we originally promised for Rogue Redemption, because we've gotten rid of all the complications that drive development into the stratosphere. We don't have complicated 3D backgrounds. We don't have to have fully animated characters walking around. We'll just have spot animation to make bring some life to the scenes. But uh, it's really all about the story. It's all about the dialogue and the interaction. And Summer Days is going to have all that, and we think it's going to be an amazing game. Uh, but it's not a gigantic soul-destroying monstrosity of development effort like we did on Quest for Glory 5 or Hero U Road to Redemption.
So if you like won the lottery and so money was no issue, like you won the lottery twice even, so you have basically bottomless pit of funding. What would be your vision of the series in terms of the future installments?
Well, with our new home and car and sitting there playing World of Warcraft, I don't know that we'd have any time to make a game.
Honestly, we've actually thought about this question before, and basically we would be doing just what we're doing now, well, except we'd have the money to do it. We would make Summer Days at Hero U, then we would make Wizard's Way, and then in between Wizard's Way and the Warrior game, we would make another small, different style game, which was small scale and wasn't so grandiose or huge production, and make a nice, interesting short game to do to get funding and build up for the next game. And then we would do, a constant thing of this. So we have a Wizards game, we have the Warriors game, we have the Paladins game, and we really have the story kind of plotted out of how these are going to go. And then the next game in the series would be a kind of a culmination where you could play Sean or you could play Nona from the Wizards game or, and the other games and alternate between them as you try to save the world from total destruction. Because at that point, we built up the story to it gets more and more dangerous as the series goes on.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have all these games plotted out in that sense.
Yeah, so doing exactly what we were going to do, but not bankrupting ourselves or losing our shirts at it, is a great stress reliever. And in a sense, stress is kind of important for game development, but we have plenty of ways of being under stress with the actual production without having to worry about external factors. So that's what we do with a few million. If we had many millions, if we suddenly one of our games made it onto New York Times and some other places, and everybody started buying hundreds of thousands of copies on it, and we actually made real money from it, then we would do all that. And in addition, we would be a little bit of a publisher that would let some of our other developers who have great ideas of their own make the games they want to make, and we could help them develop that and put some money into it. And we would also, I think, have more sophistication. We just have bigger teams, more people working on the games, and we would get better animation and more of it, and be able to really bring the games to life. Maybe get into virtual reality at some point, but I'm not even sure. We're ready for that. That we may not be the right people to do it. But yeah, just making what we're making, but on a comfortable budget so that we don't have to compromise. Absolutely, one of the things we would do is bring in voice acting, and we intentionally did not put voice acting into Hero U. That was a decision we made very early on, and the reason for that is because we've heard a lot of games ruined by amateur voice acting. So we love having voice acting. Quest for Glory 4 was an amazing process working with the actors. But it's got to be professional. It's got to be high quality, and the right people with the right voices and great production values. And because this game is twice as large as Quest for Glory 4, which was known as the CD-ROM from hell because it was so big, that it will cost quite a bit to do professional voice acting on. And in fact, the translations, I originally ruled out because we were being quoted 10 cents a word, and that's a 450,000 word game. $50,000 per language. We said we can't do that. But we've actually had volunteers come on that are willing to compromise with us and do the production much lower and maybe take some royalties on their language version and so on. So we're actually getting the translations done at a price that we still can't afford, but at least we're willing to take out loans to do that, and maybe it'll pay
Mhm.
for itself.
And in the meantime, you've been doing live streams of playing through the old Quest for Glory games.
Well, it's awesome fun. When we started doing this, Lori came up with the idea of doing these live streams, and I was like, "You're crazy! We got so much on our plate already. We don't have time to do this and prepare for it." Uh, and we actually had fan Roberta Vaughn came in, and I checked some check boxes because I didn't really understand the tools, and apparently one of the check boxes I checked connected us to our PayPal account so that people could make donations. And we were actually blown away getting hundreds of dollars of donations during the live stream.
Mhm.
So, if we did the live streams 3 days a week, we could actually fully fund the game, but we can't do
Mhm.
that many. Uh, so we're just very delighted with the generosity of our fans. We're going to give you more opportunities to be generous. We're working on setting up a Patreon page because we do constantly have people saying, I just want to contribute to your doing stuff, and wish you had a Patreon or something. So we're going to do that, and we'll see whether how many people actually want to do that. But the idea of the Patreon is that it's not going to be directly tied to any of the games. It's going to be support Corey and Lori Cole, game developers, and because right now, because the funding has been so tight, we don't take any money at all from Hero U. We actually put money into it,
Mhm.
and if we can, find patrons or something else that will allow us to just pay our bills independently, then we can focus everything in the game development budget directly into the game, and don't have to worry about stupid little things like, uh, you know, paying our insurance and stuff like that. Uh, yeah, that's. But yeah, the live streams, a lot of fun.
We're really living in the best of all times. We could not have done Hero U Rogue to Redemption and another time and place. We were at the right time with our Kickstarter because there was still this, it was a wild and woolly west of Kickstarter times where people were still, willing, trusting that the game developers will actually, provide what they say they do. And people were generous and contributed all this money just in the hopes that we could actually put out what we were promised. And so we were at the right time to do the Kickstarter. We found people that were just incredible, and it's been a blast. It's been a frustrating, horrifying, reinvent yourself constantly kind of situation. But this is what we live for. This is, and mostly it's because we have so many very, very good fans that keep our energy up and keep us going. That remind us why we're doing all this work. It's because, they really appreciate what we're doing. So this is where we were meant to be, you know?
There's a huge element of luck, of just being in the right place at the right time. And that's what got us into Sierra was luck and friendship in context. And same thing with Hero U is that one of our big fans runs a site called Quest for More Glory. And when we put on our Kickstarter updates that we were looking for some more developers to help us make the game, she publicized it on Quest for More Glory, and we had a couple of fans of that site came in and said, "Oh yeah, I'd like to work on that project." And I was very naive about budgets. We've basically been doing this on a 1990 level budget, uh, forgetting about little things like inflation and stuff that programmers actually make real money these days, whereas they didn't make anything back then. I certainly didn't. Uh, but we've gotten some very dedicated people showed up and helped us turn this in reality. Especially want to do shout out to Sydney Hamilton, who was earning far more before she came to work for us, but you know she loves interactive fiction and has really gotten into helping us make these games the best they can be. Uh, and Joshua down in New Zealand came on, Joshua Smith, and he really brought in a lot of discipline and getting the systems code working, and you know getting stuff to work with Unity and so on. So we have these few key people that show up out of nowhere and as far as we're concerned. But it's obviously been other fans and so on helping us find them that have made this a reality. So I have to admit that Hero U, that project could have failed any time during the last 6 years. So many things went wrong with that, and partly through just us being too stubborn to give up and putting in our own money and having people show up out of the blue and contributing a lot of money and a lot of their time and helping to promote the game and stuff like that has kept it going. And we did manage to release the game. And right now, I'm very sympathetic of our friends, Mark Crow and Scott Murphy are working on this thing called Space Venture, that are the original developers of Space Quest. And they have gone through, I've watched their development entirely parallel hours. They went through every single problem we went through. They made the same discovery with Unity. They tried to do 2D games and it didn't work right. Went 3D and just everything we went through, they've gone through. And they're still struggling to get their game out. But, I have faith that they will manage to do it. But it's really, really hard to make these huge, complex adventure games with today's tools. And it wasn't really any easier in the 90s. The reason that Sierra and LucasArts both stopped making adventure games around the turn of the century had to do, God, that makes it sound ancient. I guess it is. Had to do with the fact that people were doing these first-person shooters, which at the time could be developed much more cheaply than an adventure game, and that were selling 10 times as many copies because they were accessible to anyone can run around and shoot things. Whereas people who want to read stories and solve complex puzzles, that's a pretty limited subset of players. So the adventure game died for a while because the games were too expensive to make and had too small an audience. And then a few companies like the Longest Journey and so on came through, Red Thread Games, and started making new adventure games. And then with Kickstarter showing that it was possible that Double Fine Adventure, which became Broken Age, showing that you could actually make a fan-supported game, said, yeah, there is still life to these. And meanwhile, those first-person shooters now cost $100 million to make instead of $1 million. And all of a sudden, adventure games are competitive again. But we still don't have the huge audience of pure action games. Our games are thinking games, and that's always been a limited subset of players. But if you love solving puzzles and feeling like you're really in a story and meeting with characters, we have the type of games you want.
Now, on May 4th, 2019, you're doing another live stream of playing through Quest for Glory 3.
Yes, we are. Should be exciting because we haven't actually played these games since we made them. And so it's, oh, is that what happens? They said that. It's always, it's a big surprise. Plus, it gives us a real, quote unquote FaceTime with our fans, that we get to talk about things or decisions we made if we can remember what those decisions were, But it gives us a real fun time of just being with the fans and interacting with them and having fun together.
Yeah, I could definitely say, as a fan, from the fan perspective, it is an absolute blast to get to hang out with you guys for a day and watch you play the games that we grew up and loved, and see how the actual designers have a good time, or sometimes a really hard time playing through these old games.
Let's not forget on the New Year's Eve stream, getting to watch Lori rage quit on her own game. That was the highlight of my life, I think.
Well, we were running in terror, running away from all the monsters for a while on Heroes Quest. Kind of funny because we one of the things we always thought we were making easy games. We were making games that were very accessible, that anybody would be able to play, and that were fair. That all the hints for the puzzles were in the game. And we're discovering that in actually playing them, maybe they weren't so easy. Quest for Glory 3, I have the slight advantage. Of course, it's been 25 years, but I did actually play all the way through the original games. I wasn't on the original development team for it. So I think I still remember the game, but I have a feeling that I'm going to find lots of parts that I have a really hard time with. Quest for Glory 2, I was a little bit appalled playing through. I came up with about a half a dozen misspellings and typos and said, how did we leave those in the game? Uh, but what it comes down to is no game is perfect. I want to write a little blog article about this because I've been seeing some of these stuff, people raging against the latest multiplayer games and so on, and saying, this company did not deliver what they promised, and this game is crap. Uh, and really, what they mean is that there's a whole lot of stuff they like in the game, but some things are imperfect, uh, and maybe even things are bad. But every single game has those. It's just we have this glowing memory of game we played 20 years ago that how wonderful it was, but really they were pretty primitive back then, and there were a lot of compromises made. Uh, and there are compromises in Hero U, uh, but we still think we managed to make a solid game. Not a perfect game, but a good game. We are getting a lot of fan letters that say Hero U is the best game of the series. It's better than any of the Quest for Glories, and we don't actually know. We can't actually tell. We're writing these games. We were so immersed in them that we can't really tell what's good and what's bad. So and of course we have other fans telling us the entire game's crap, and we know that isn't true. So we kind of take it with a grain of salt. But that's we've gotten that for every game. We were the first person with Quest for Glory 3 set in East Africa. We were the first major game to have an African setting, and significant persons of color as major characters in the game, and so on. And Laurie tried to give them all accents so you can get a feeling that these people all speak differently. And we actually got hate mail on that. We got people telling us that we were promoting stereotypes about black people not speaking proper English. And no, we give them interesting accents. The character Ifatayo is the head chef in Hero U. She's a world-renowned chef, has traveled all around the world. Is kind of the Gordon Ramsay celebrity chef. But she speaks with a Jamaican accent. And my memory of what a Jamaican accent is that I worked with a woman. My first job when I took a year off school back in the 70s. I worked with a woman from Jamaica, and she was had a master's degree and dressed professionally, and was really smart, but she had an accent, and it was charming, just wonderful and beautiful. And this brilliant woman who was just the absolute model of a career. She wanted me to get an afro, by the way. Or at least a perm. That would have been. I still had hair then. Didn't last for very many years after that. So maybe I should have done it while I could. But yeah, Eileen was absolutely awesome. And that's how we think of as our minority. We've got not just different human races, but we've got all sorts of non-human things. We have cat people and dog people, and people can shape change into wolves, and all sorts of interesting things in our games. And we try to treat all of them with respect and power, and we want to everybody playing the games to feel like anybody can be powerful, anybody can be a hero. You can do great things with your life, and if you just put in the work and the time and the effort and caring to do that. Yeah, we get hate mail. We say, okay, well, they have their opinion. We don't think so. And fortunately, we get about 10 times as much love mail as we get hate mail. We get critical mail that is basically saying, here's why I think these things don't work and how you could have improved on them. And a lot of times, we totally agree with it. Say, yeah, they're right. But given a limited time and budget, we spent over $1 million developing a game that had $500,000 in upfront funding, and less than that actually when you take out the fees and so on. And we think we did an absolutely amazing job with the budget we have. But $1 million sounds like a lot of money. But similar games, Broken Age cost $8 million to make. And we don't have that kind of budget. We would love to make our games perfect, and we know that if we did have that budget, we still wouldn't make them perfect. We would still we would just have different kinds of flaws. We'd have more impressive graphics and animation, and we'd have full voice acting and so on. And some people would hate the voice acting. I can't play Broken Age because one of the voice actors throws me off. Sets me off. uh, so all that money they put into it for me was a negative, unfortunately. Yeah, every game has wonderful things, and every game has flaws, and you just have to decide: are you having fun with it? And if not, can you put in a little suspension of disbelief to not worry about the things that bother you and still manage to have fun with it?
Well, I'd like to say, to everyone listening too, please be supportive, share with your friends. Get the word out when it comes to Summer Days and Road to Redemption for those who are yet to discover it, because I would love, just selfishly, to see this series expand. I mean, when you explained your kind of long-term goal of going through, the different from Paladin, etc. onwards, it almost reminds me of like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where it's like the end game where all the characters can play together interchangeable is like the Avengers. Like that just sounds like such a just mouth-watering prospect. It sounds so exciting. So for selfish reasons, I would love to see this go on as long as possible. So I hope everyone out there listening, knows how important it is to get just word of mouth. We're a bit of a niche community to a degree, and so everyone's word actually does count. So please share these things, and of course we'll make sure we share the Patreon, things like that, to help push this forward. I'm not sure about Rick, but I have just one last question. It's a little bit cheeky, but I was wondering, and you can approach this either in a loving, touching, deep way or in a cynical way. It's up to you. But the question is, what's it been like throughout all these years to work directly with your spouse?
Well, we're both still alive. We haven't
And we're
strangled each other.
Yeah, and we're still married, surprisingly at times.
Yeah. Now, my theory on divorce is that it's just too expensive and complicated and annoying, and it's much easier to stay together.
And and the fact that I can cook really good food, and yeah, I mean, it hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy to do these things, and it's been frustrating, and you get frustrated with each other, and you yell, and sometimes you fight.
And
Uh,
it's actually Lori laid down the ground rules early on. Is she said that if I ever said my wife, I think I'll keep her, would be grounds for divorce. When I married you for your cooking, probably would have been grounds for divorce at some point. But the fact is that she's effectively a master chef, and everything she makes is delicious, and she happens to enjoy cooking. So that's why we're working on the Heroes Feast cookbook. And this was an inspiration from as Lori posted stuff about some of the meals she was making, and people said, "Oh, you ought to do a Quest for Glory Gloriana cookbook." And we said, "Sure, why not?" So that's another one of the little side projects that we have going that we're not putting a lot of time into now, except Lori uses an excuse to try out new recipes.
So just before we wrap up here, do you have anything you'd like to plug or any shout outs you'd like to make?
Oh, I think we've done lots of that. You should check out our Facebook page because we had a Google Plus thing, but never much going on there. We both have Twitter accounts that I look at once in a while, but our real interaction with the fans is on Facebook. And we actually have a Discord now that we've also started up. But if you look at facebook.com/The School for Heroes, and that's properly spelled out as HEROES. That's the School for Heroes is the Hero U page on Facebook. And we actually spend far too much of our time up there answering questions from fans and having some interactions. And as we said, many of our fans know more about our own games than we do, so you can have the interaction with the other fans. You'll probably get more details than we can give you.
Well, I mean, I could definitely say for myself that the Quest for Glory series was absolutely, like, the entire series is my favorite game of all time. As someone who grew up playing video games, with video games being a big part of my life, Quest for Glory series is number one for me. Like, it is undisputed. It sits on top there. Your games have just been like a huge part of not only my childhood but my entire life. So I just wanted to say personally, thank you very much for everything you've done. It's been an amazing impact on my life, and I'm just so overjoyed to see you continuing to make more games moving forward, because it'll just be, it's always been just such a huge part of me, and I'm just really excited for that to continue.
And
Well,
that's
gosh.
that's the reason why we keep fighting this, why we keep forcing ourselves to do this work, to face the frustrations and the stress and all of the hard times, is because the fans and people like you that felt our games made a difference in their lives. And hearing that says, yeah, we did something right. And we want to keep doing something right, because there are always more people who could use something like this in their lives.
Absolutely.
And of course, we're gamers too, and we'd be happily spending 10 or 12 hours every day playing games. So it's kind of hard to squeeze in a few hours to work on our own. You know, but we feel this obligation, and you know, and it's fun. It's fun, but it's so stressful that sometimes we just have to get away and do other stuff.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come onto our show. I hope to have you again sometime soon, perhaps. But it's been an absolute honor and pleasure to have you on and to hear you talk about Quest for Glory, the general process, and moving forward with the Hero U series. So thank you so much again. It's been just an absolute pleasure to
Yes,
have you on.
thank you so much. Love you lot.
Thank you very much.
We're honored.